Hello, I'm Eliezer Parrilla. Welcome to the Artbar Gallery at Kingston, New York. The exhibition began October the 1st, 2016, and will end on the 29th. Today is the 22nd of October.
It's got to be experienced too. We're gonna have to build maquettes.
Well, the Guanches series began through my investigation about my ancestors from my mother's and my father's side. Uh, their great grandparents came from Tenerife, which is the largest island of the Canary Islands. And I started doing some investigations, and I found out that the original inhabitants were a completely different group than the Spaniards, and that they were conquered at the end, close to the time that Christopher Columbus, quote unquote, discovered the Americas. So I became interested in researching their lives, and during that same time, I began to experiment with this sort of work, which is basically using the white background and just inserting black carbon paint and designing mostly abstract figures. Um, Interesting enough, this one is called Inside the Outside. So the ideas continue to evolve. I mean, after beginning to do my initial research, not only on the historical element, but also the investigative media elements. So it became then afterwards, it just became a form of expression for other investigations that I was doing, which really reflect on the titles of the work. The Guanches were a particular culture from North Africa. We don't know for sure how they got there. It's said that they got there with the Greeks, others say Phoenicians, but they really were not involved as navigators. They were brought, the belief is that they were brought to the island, and they were Berbers, basically. And I think it's the only quote unquote white group of people that they were isolated for 2,000 years. And they have some sort of a kingdoms. Tenerife, for example, which Guanche really means from Tenerife, I believe. These people, they were warriors, and they had this island. The way they had the island divided by kingdoms, the strip of the land was in the middle. You had this open area where everyone could hunt, and then the kingdoms were in between. So you always had this element that would divide them and that everyone had access to. So this particular piece I call Las Cuevas de Tenerife, the caves of Tenerife. Well, because they lived mostly in caves. And if you go to Tenerife right now, those caves have been turned into tourist areas where you have restaurants, and you still see parts of the caves where you have tables and so forth made out of stone. The reason that I became involved with this is because I remember one of my uncles passed away. We were at the funeral, and I asked my aunt Maggie, I asked her, where are we from? And she said, Tenerife. So I was surprised that she knew that. That's when I started doing the investigation. So in doing so, at the same time, I was exploring a particular technique. And it was almost like film. I would cover the whole canvas or whatever material I work with, I would cover it with a transparent acrylic medium, and then I would cover it all in black. And from there, I would begin to use different materials. And this one in particular is just brushes. And this is all improvised. This is not something I planned. The only thing that I find here that has some sense is this triangle with these 3 points. This is something that I always use to point out Hiroshima, a nuclear bomb, atomic bomb. But everything else It's just done as part of a calling and improvisation. So this is a beginning, which I continue to do now, of investigations, not only historical aspect, but also the experimental aspects within the media itself.
You should start sketching out ideas, thoughts about how you're thinking about the new studio. Only can, it's going to be working this year.
In addition to the Guanche series, even before the Guanche series, I had begun working on wood reliefs. And I started working with them individually because I had some children coming over with my friends, and I had an old scroll saw that someone had given me. And I wanted to demonstrate something to one of the children, and I began to cut a figure. Well, after that, it just opened up a completely new world for me. So I began to make all these different figures. It's not really drawing them. It was drawing them with the saw itself. I would take a piece of wood and began to work out forms. At the same time, I was studying different artists like Matisse, Picasso, Asian art, Central American art, all these different forms I began to look at and then begin to cut the woods and finding different forms. After a while, I had a large inventory of all these different forms. And this one in particular, because this is one of the first ones I did. Not the first one, but one of the first ones I did. This one in particular was done from a piece of furniture that was left in the garage. And many of these were pieces that were just lying around, and I began to just experiment and make them. But then they all came together into different forms to create this. Now, this creation here started in 2013. You see the date 2016 because as I was getting ready for this exhibition, I began to pull out all these pieces that I had done, and I began to find that I wanted to include something else, put more color and so forth. This, for example, here was a large painting on plywood that I cut into different pieces. Part of an IBM card that I inserted here for particular reasons. So, and it has almost an architectural feeling to it, like the front of a store. So this was really quite an experience for me, to begin to take forms, these wood reliefs, and begin to integrate them into stories. The title of this is Prayer for Prison Earth. And it's interesting because last night I had a dream related to this. I was just thinking that I would be here standing, speaking about this. And it's interesting that I decided to choose this particular piece because if you think of The Matrix, that film The Matrix, I believe that to a certain point it is true. And that's why I mentioned this here, prayer for prison earth, because I feel that we are imprisoned here. We are imprisoned here, and there are particular cultural and historical conditioning that brings us into living the type of lifestyle that we feel that we have options. But my feeling and my understanding is we don't have that many options. Yes, we have the option to vote, whatever that may mean. We have the option to work, to buy, to pay taxes, to die. But I feel that the potential, the power of who we really are has not really developed to the point that it should. And I think that the gods, quote unquote, get very upset when the creative individuals begin to open up and begin to become independent. So all the work that I have here, all the work that I produce, and this is something that I was thinking this morning, it's part of really trying to decipher, trying to understand our times, how we fit here, where do we find ourselves, and are we truly free? Those are the concerns I have. This is another piece that I'm pretty happy with, and I'd like to talk a little bit about it because there's so many things happening here. First of all, this yellow background here was a painting that I did on wood. Now, the name of this piece, which really connects to what I've been discussing, is called From Guanche to Pancho, which is a very interesting title. And I'll tell you what really motivated me to say this, or to give it this title, because the Guanches were a culture by themselves, most likely Berbers. They came into Tenerife and the Canary Islands in general, and they lived there for, at least for 2,000 years, as I mentioned before. The Spaniards during La Reconquista also invade Tenerife, and it took them close to 100 years to conquer these quote-unquote primitive people, which is very interesting because these quote-unquote primitive people had pyramids, and they used to also mummify those that would die. They would use goat skin. So I used the expression from guanche to pancho, thinking that from guanches, then they became pancho, which is really the Spanish. They became Spanish. But it's very interesting because it runs through our blood. There, people from Louisiana, people from Argentina, from Santo Domingo, from Cuba, from Venezuela, from Puerto Rico, from all these different countries, they have in their system, in their blood, they have still this guanche element. So now, it's interesting because there are particular characteristics like the Cubans and the Puerto Ricans, the way they speak Spanish. I remember I was in Spain and someone said, "Are you from Tenerife?" I said, "No, I'm from Puerto Rico." So we continue within not only the way that we speak the Spanish, referring to Pancho, but also a lot of the words that we use still are related to this culture. So it's really a comment on colonialism. And it's almost like triple colonialism, from the invasion of Spain to become Spanish, to the invasion of Tenerife, to become Canario, but still Spanish, to the invasion of another culture that had been there thousands of years, the Taínos, to then become colonized again, and then coming here to the United States. It's a very interesting sequence of events that motivate me to develop this sort of expression. After a while, I had a large inventory of all these different forms. There's so many things happening here. Each of these, they have a life by themselves. I mean, I can just pull this out, but each of them, it's like life coming together as a particular time frame, but everyone or every individual here is a different life from a different time.
You should start sketching out ideas, thoughts about what you're thinking about.
This piece, as a follow-up of the previous one that we saw, is dated 2013. When you think it's something sacred about this piece. This is around, close to the time that my father passed away, and these materials most of the materials that you find here was wood that was already in the property. So this particular piece that you find here is wood from a piece of furniture, including the door, the drawer of the furniture pieces of plywood, pieces of metal that I found. And I find this piece very special because it has a particular quality that has been around for a very long time. So there's this belief that everything continues to have a certain vibration. You know? And this piece is called Spirit of Death. And what you see here is almost someone directing the forces towards a person and an angel spirit on top of the head. And you can see what's interesting here is that you see this particular element also being shown over here. And this really connects to the Mayans, okay? It has this, it's as if a spirit on top of the head. After completing it, I was talking to Helen Paulette, who I've been working with. She has been preparing the molds that later go to Quebec. And I said, you know, this would be an interesting piece to cast in bronze. And she took it with her and she prepared the molding. And she told me, you know something, I just want to let you know that the people over there are going to do the patina are very excited about this, which I was surprised. And she mentioned because no one else is really working on this particularity. They usually have the bronze cast and that's it. So they feel excited they'll be able to really introduce certain qualities within the coloration. And then she remarked when she brought in the bronze one that she was about to pick up what she thought was a wood one and realized with the weight that it was the bronze. So one can see how closely linked. And she mentioned, she said, you know, I love the wood piece, but bronze just gives it a different life. You know, and it's true. You still feel the experience, but yet something else happens, you know, with the weight and the color. And I find it rather interesting how they were able to patina this area that still looks like the old paint that existed on the piece of furniture that I worked on. And what I like about it also is when she did the molding, she was able to keep the quality of the wood. So it's very interesting that not only do you develop the concept, but certain natural aspects of the original piece is frozen on the bronze. This piece in particular, which is called Standing Beast, was the first one that I had cast in bronze. Not only it was the first one, but this is one of a kind. It's what they call the lost wax. In other words, I gave Helen, because she's from Quebec, the original piece in wood, and she took it with her and just gave it to the foundry. And the foundry prepared it, and when the heat went into the casting process, the whole wood piece just burnt and disappeared. So this one in particular is one of a kind. And the way this came about is because I began, in my experimentation, I began to work on human figures and on horses. And one day, the horse and the human figure came together. And this is how the beast, in particular, came about. And again, as I mentioned before, I love that the wood texture has been kept on the base. This represents pieces of plywood and pieces of wood. And this was also, the original was a piece of wood, and you can still see the different texture pertaining to it. It just gives it a particular gravity to it. I like that. very satisfied with the outcome of this particular piece, and considering this one of a kind. And I find that the curator really did such a beautiful job to put this piece here right next to this one. And this rhythm and trend, I wanted to have this piece also because what you see here at in this exhibition is really small intentions of a larger picture of many, many other pieces that I've done. So this is like, let's say maybe 12% of my production. It's just a series that were chosen to point out some of the ideas that I've been exploring. And this takes me to this particular piece, which is much more connected to what I've been doing for many, many years. It just demonstrates a continuum of the exploration that I've been doing, not only with forms, but with color. And as I stand here, I could see the relationship between the sculpture, which is basically a wood relief, we would say, and the sort of two-dimensional aspect of the formation of the different characters and the unity of them, how it just comes together. So it's really a continuation of this. You know, after leaving the space that day, October the 1st, uh, I felt really highly motivated to continue working. So I went back to my studio and I just continuous as nothing had happened. You know, I remember my friend Don Light would say, "Never spend too much time admiring your own work." He would say, and I think it's a very good point. You do what you do, you use it as an inspiration, and you move on. And that's the way I feel now. I'm working on some new ideas. They're there, paintings, sculptures, reliefs, and so forth. And that's the way I feel. Motivated to continue on working. I feel almost like this is just the beginning. And I've been working for 33 years. No, it was 2008. It's August, I remember. And I decided, you know, I think it's time to leave Brooklyn. I was in Brooklyn for 33 years. And I love Brooklyn. Brooklyn is still in my heart. The Republic of Brooklyn, that is. And I decided that I wanted to move. I wanted to go to the country. And I remember that in the 70s I was here. I was living here. Not really living here. I would come and visit. But it was almost like living here because I would come every week and usually hang out in Woodstock and go hiking and so forth. I said, you know, one day I want to move back up here. And I finally did. I moved to West Hurley in 2008, that is, and I met many different artists. And amongst them, one of my favorite, Pablo Shine. And Pablo Shine had an exhibition here, a group exhibition. He said, you know, I recommend that you meet Ali Constant at the Artbar Gallery. And I contacted her. She came over to my studio and she loved my work. And she said, when would you like to exhibit? And I said, well, how about a year from now? She says, a year from now? That's a long time. I said, yeah, but I think I need a year. She says, that's what you want. She says, how about October the 1st? I said, perfect. Well, I have to really thank her because you have to, you know, when I spoke to her, I said I was going to invite one person to do the curation. I'm going to invite another person. And a close friend of mine, Pete Parrilla, said, you know, Ellie, let her do her job. Drop the paintings, drop whatever you need to drop, let her do what she needs to do because that's what she does. Well, I don't regret that. Because as I mentioned before, when I walked in, I don't know if I could have found a better way for the whole exhibition to come together. I have to thank her. I really have to thank Ali from the Artbar Gallery for doing such a beautiful job. And not only such a beautiful job, she's so enchanting. She's very much open, you know, to new artists. And she is as excited about the work as the artists and all the other people are. And I really have to thank her. It has been really a pleasure to exhibit in this gorgeous space. And I also have to thank her dad, who really, it was his idea. He really put this together. I mean, these are fine people. And I really hope that this gallery becomes an institution for many, many years to come. Because here, Kingston, you know, is really, they're saying, I read in the New York Times recently that Kingston, people from Brooklyn are coming out to Kingston. This is the place, this is the time. I'm very happy with the work I've done and with this particular gallery, the Artbar Gallery.
And now we got a bar stool, so we're like bar height at the counter.
Yeah, 3 cheers, Ellie. Corey, when are you going to have? What's your event?
It was really a treat. October the 1st, it was my birthday. And at the same time, I was celebrating my birthday and also celebrating the work that I've accomplished during the last 3 years. And I decided to come in to have an opportunity to see the work for the first time because I hadn't seen it after it was put up. Now, usually when I finish a piece, I look at it, let it dry, and I go over to the garage and just put it away. And there's only at times when someone may ask me about a particular piece that I pull it out, and we'll put it on, we'll look at it together. But last 3 years, from 2013, which is what this exhibition is about, I had the opportunity to really look at my work. And I remember walking through the entrance, and I felt that it was no longer my work. There was like a certain, it was almost religious. You know, I just stood there and just looked at it. And I felt that, you know, we say it's our work, but we're basically simply just a tool. And if we're sensitive enough to our times, that's what really makes us modern, you know? It's not a matter of doing a pretty picture. It's really a matter of taking everything that's there that you could have access to and try to decipher your times, the world around you, and at the same time explore possibilities of how you can express that. And you hope that you can walk into the space or some other space where the work of the artist is, and the artist is no longer there. The artist could have passed away years later. And yet the heart, the soul, the concerns, the pains, the celebrations are still there, you know, still resonating, which is interesting. Not only the work, but the materials, like the old materials from a drawer. Someone cut that wood. We forget. The tree was there. People with feeling, with lives, with children, cut that tree and dragged it and cut it, was taken to a factory. Someone designed the cabinet, put it together, painted it, put it in a truck. Someone came, a couple walked, liked it, brought it in, and it could have stood in the house and then taken out of the house, put into the garage and put away, no longer needing it, and just to take that little piece and put it together with something else, with another material, and give it life again. Who would think? So, it is really, we ask ourselves, the role of the artist to be some sort of form of communication that can still give life to a time that no longer exists, but is the experience of the person that at that moment, or the group of people that are looking at it. So we hope that we don't expect the same interpretation, but we hope that the person is touched and that a feeling that may not be able to be expressed can be experienced and could link the viewer into the past, which is really the present, trying to form an expression of their times, linking it to the times of those that view it.
Laurel and Hardy is more situational. They find themselves like trying to move a piano. Right. It's very
Like
good.
there are certain parts of Babies in Toyland that is very amusing. Like when
Right.
they order the soldiers,
Right. So they're in one of the things, right?
So that was the feeling. I couldn't say in words at that stage. When I walked in and I just saw the work, I said, "Oh, it's it's someone else. It's no longer yours." You know, it's like when you let your children go. It's their future. It's their time.